We are now, yes, live and recording. Great. It's great to have everybody. Happy Easter. Happy Passover. We just finished Passover here in Israel. It goes hand in hand. Jesus, being Jewish, was coming to Jerusalem, as is the commandment, one of the three pilgrimage holidays, to celebrate Passover, like about 300,000 Jews from all over the world and the city in Israel, all of them coming to do the mitzvah, to do this good deed of fulfilling God's decrees, of coming to the temple, giving their offerings, getting the Kohanim blessings from the temple. When the temple is up and running, everything revolves around the temple in Jerusalem. Um, our entire life is based around the temple. This is not just a religious authority. This is a political authority. This is the Supreme Court, the judicial authority. This is where the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, used to live. And they would decree all of the rules and regulations as they saw fit. And from Jerusalem, it will pass, from the temple, it will pass to the rest of the Jewish world. And that was the way it was during that time period. So being in Jerusalem for the Passover is a big deal. And we have a blend of people here. We have Jews from Greece that made their way, took them about 3 months probably to walk or sail. We have Jews from Babylon. We have Jews from Ethiopia. We have Jews from, I don't know, China, whatever it is. And imagine all of the languages that you would hear, kind of like walking in the old city of modern day Jerusalem. We have not just the locals that are very fluent in different languages, because in Israel we have Arabic and Hebrew that are basically national languages. We have English as an international language. We have Christians from various parts of the world that live in the old city. We have the Armenians, we have the Greeks and the Russians. 20% of the Jewish population of Israel in the 1990s was Russian. So we have a huge Russian part of our population, and you can hear all of that exactly as it was in Jesus's days. So when we're walking in the old city, or when I'm showing you the video, you will hear in the background mostly Arabic. I have to say that when I was walking in the old city, it was almost completely empty, which also has a lot of nice touches when we talk about the Via Dolorosa itself, because all of it takes place basically in the middle of the night. When Jesus is arrested, it is the small hours of the night. He is taken to the Jewish people for sentencing, and they decide to bring him over to Pontius Pilate. We are waking Pontius Pilate up in the middle of the night so that we can take care of Jesus. And this is after Passover, after the meal itself. This is a big meal. We drink at least 4 cups during cups of wine. During the feast, we are incredibly tired, and therefore people are sleeping. And whether it's 4 a.m., 5 a.m., or 6 a.m., when Jesus walks to the place where he's going to be crucified, you can almost sense the stillness, like they're thieves in the dark. There's nothing of a procedure of judging as it was back in those days. That's not how a court was run back in those days. They wake up the governor in the middle of the night in his house, probably still in his pajamas, and he's supposed to hear about what this guy Jesus did, and he's going to sentence him to death. Now, all of this is to say that historically, if we're waking up the governor of the area in the middle of the night, he's probably in his bed sleeping. And where would he be sleeping? In one of the palaces. Now, he didn't build the palace. He used the palaces that King Herod built for himself a few decades earlier. King Herod builds palaces everywhere he thinks that he's going to live in, or at least visit in. We have palaces in the middle of the desert in Masada and Herodian. We have palaces in Caesarea. We have a palace in Jerusalem as well. So Pontius Pilate actually lives in Caesarea, but 3 times a year, he's going to make the trip from Caesarea over to Jerusalem. Caesarea, the capital of the pagans in the area of Israel back in those days, Jerusalem, the capital of the Jewish people. Why does he have to make his way over here? Well, think of it this way. If you're going to the Macy's parade in the United States or any big event in the world, doesn't really matter. Let's say the Olympics this summer are going to be in Japan or somewhere, I'm not really sure where. I am sure that the chief of the police of that city where the event is taking place is not sitting at home watching it on TV. He is on the ground. He is making sure that his subordinates are supposed to do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, that they're not provoking anything, that things are going to be as calm as possible. So if the chief of the police is Pontius Pilate, then he's going to leave Caesarea, make his way a few days of a trip over to Jerusalem, and from the palace of Herod in Caesarea, he's going to the palace of Herod in Jerusalem. Now, I'm going to share a screen over here. This is a picture that I drew, so please be kind and gentle with me. If you were with me in earlier webinars, you should recognize this. You can see the Mount of Olives down below at the bottom of the screen. You can see this is the mountain over here where the temple is going to be built. This is what we call the Upper West Side up here. And the city of David, original city of Jerusalem. The wall would be here, going this way, down this area, approximately to this point, where we have a huge fortress named the Antonial Fortress. We'll just put an A over here for Antonial's Fortress. We have the Temple Mount surrounding the mountain itself, something like this. The temple is built just above the X. That's where the Holy of Holies is. And the city wall continues from the city of David around this area. Over here, we have the valley where I'm drawing a line. So obviously, we're still on the mountain. And it reaches somewhere, well, I made a little mistake over here, but basically, this is the city. The pools of Bethesda are somewhere over here. Let's just put a P, and it's divided into two pools with 5 colonnades around there. And up here in modern day times is Jaffa Gate, and there is a fortress as well here that was built by King Herod. And right next to this fortress, where I have this little square, let's put an F for fortress, the ruins of one of the largest buildings in all of Jerusalem from ancient times can be seen. And this is the palace of King Herod the Great. The area of the palace itself equals the size of the Temple Mount. I will remind you, the Temple Mount area is roughly the size of 36 acres, 144 dunams, 27 American football fields, 22 European football fields. I think we said about 36,500 ping pong tables. There are 300,000 Jews coming to Jerusalem back in those days, and they need a place to be on the Temple Mount, and that's why this platform is the size that I just gave. Okay? Now, if we are correct in saying that Pontius Pilate goes from Caesarea and makes his way to Jerusalem and is going to be in the palace, this is the palace. And therefore, this is probably where the sentencing is going to take place. They've unearthed around here ruins of a gate, a small gate. Maybe this is what they are talking about when they talk about the garden gate, the Ginat gate, small garden gate area. And then the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built about 300 plus years after the events. The church is built in this area. It's about 200 yards, 300 yards away from the Temple Mount area. So Jesus would have been sentenced over here. He would have walked outside the city this way. And he would have been crucified somewhere outside the city walls. This is very common in the Roman period for a few reasons. First of all, the Romans use crucifixion as a warning sign. They want to show you what happens if you rebel against them. This will be your punishment. This is one of the most brutal ways ever invented of putting a person to death. You can be on a cross for 3 to maybe even 5 days, excruciating pain. I'm not going to go into the physiology of it, but it is a horrible way of execution. And Jesus was there with 2 others. We call them the good thief and the bad thief. One showed compassion towards Jesus, which is why he is known as the good thief. The other one did not. And it is always close. The crucifixion place is supposed to be close to the entrance or the exit of the city. That way people see what is going on. Now, there was also, this is probably true, another gate over here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Let's talk about the 24 hours of the crucifixion. So Jesus is going to have the Passover meal. We assume this is where it's going to be, around here on what we call the Upper West Side, Mount Zion nowadays, upper room area, upper U room R. Great. From the upper room, he's going to exit the city. He's going to walk towards the valley, which is right over here. This is the valley area. This valley is known as the Kidron Valley. And when you cross that valley, you reach the Mount of Olives. In the Mount of Olives, obviously, we have lots of olive trees. This is why it was called the Mount of Olives. Mount of Olives is the most mentioned mountain in the entire Bible, both the Jewish text and the Christian text. A lot of events take place around here. A lot of events are supposed to take place with the Mount of Olives when we talk about the end of days also. And Jesus is going to be in what we call the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, Gethsemane is 2 Hebrew words, Gat, Shmanim. Gat is an olive press. Shmanim is oil. So this is an oil press where you have a lot of olive trees. Obviously, you're going to have people pressing the olives for oil. So right around here is where he's going to take 3 of the disciples, leave them, walk to be on his own, let's say around this area, where he prays to the Father, if this cup could be taken from me, but not my will be done, but yours. He goes back, the disciples, what did we just say? The disciples are tired. They fell asleep. The only thing that Jesus asked them to do was to stay awake while he goes to pray. But they weren't even able to do that. The soul wants, but the body fails. Peter, of course, is there. Peter fails once again. Peter fails Jesus quite a lot during the gospel stories, unfortunately. Every time there's a chance to shine, Peter is going to fail. He is going to try to walk on water, and everything is fine until he takes his eyes off of Jesus, and then he starts to sink. He's with Jesus over here when Jesus asks the disciples to sit and wait while he goes to pray, and he falls asleep, not once, more than that. And of course, he's going to deny Jesus 3 times later on, just before Jesus is sent to Pilate. So to this area right over here is where Judas is going to make his way. And while Jesus is on his way back to the city of Jerusalem, they're going to meet Judas. Judas is going to kiss Jesus. And that was the sign for the arresting people to take him. And they take him back up here somewhere. We have a traditional site today, which is Caiaphas's house. Caiaphas is the high priest of the Jewish people back in those days. And there is this mock sentence where they try to figure out what to do with Jesus over here. This is where Peter is going to deny Jesus 3 times. And from here, they move probably to the palace for the sentencing of Jesus by Pontius Pilate. And from here, as we said, Jesus makes his way towards the place of crucifixion, where today we have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it has 2 domes, one above the crucifixion site right over here, and one where the grave, obviously nowadays it's an empty grave, but where the grave is supposed to be. Now, hopefully everything up until this point is clear, because this is the historical route that Jesus probably did in the last 12, 15 hours before the crucifixion and during the crucifixion itself. The traditional Via Dolorosa, starting in the 4th century, basically was supposed to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. Did they walk exactly like I just showed you? Probably, give or take. They definitely went from the upper room towards the Mount of Olives, and from there to where the sentencing was, and from there to the church that they're just building in the 4th century. So from the 4th century, this is probably the path. Problem is, in the 7th century, Jerusalem is overtaken by the Muslims, and it wasn't always allowed for the Christians to go ahead and walk wherever they wanted. And in the 11th century AD, about 1,000 years ago, this is already after the Christian church has split into the Orthodox world and the Catholic world, and now we have different traditions for each of these sides. The Catholics were able to walk a very specific route, which took them from the Antonial fortress over here to the place of the crucifixion over here. And they decided that there are going to be 14 stations that they're going to walk. And that number 14 is a very special number. Let's check out why exactly. I'm going to try and do some text here. Can everybody see the word David on the screen? Let me just unmute everybody basically if you want. And that way we can have a conversation if need be. The word David in Hebrew, this is the word David in Hebrew. It's 3 letters only, by the way, in Hebrew. Okay, I can't make it bigger. But I can do it like this. I want to remind you that every Hebrew letter has a numeric value. A is 1, B is 2, C 3, D 4, E 5, F 6, and so on and so forth. And the letters Daled, Vav, Daled. Daled is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it equals 4. Vav, the letter, equals 6. It's the 6th letter of the alphabet. And again, we have the Daled, which equals 4. Now add that up, and what do we get? 4 plus 6 plus 4 is 14. And by using the Hebrew geometry, by using the idea of letters that equal numbers in Hebrew, by having 14 stations of the cross, the Catholics are showing the connection between Jesus and David, because the Messiah must be from the line of David. Now, this is not the first time in the Christian world that geometry, the Hebrew geometry, is being used. There are quite a few other places where it's used, not just in the Hebrew text, but also in the Christian text. I will take you to the last chapter of the book of John. Jesus is reappearing to the disciples in various places. The last place he appears to them is the Sea of Galilee area, just before he is going to ascend to the heavens. And when they're fishing on the boats, they caught nothing all night. And then Jesus comes along and he tells them, cast your nets on the other side, and they carry a lot of fish into the nets. And while they're having breakfast, somebody counted the fish, and they have a number, 153. 153 fish were caught in that net. Now, there are many ways of translating 153, but one of them is these 3 words, or these 2 words. Now, I know that you don't really read Hebrew, so let me just translate this in English. This is what Ani Elohim in Hebrew is. And the letters for Ani Elohim, the letters that I just wrote here, this These letters equal exactly 153. So when they count 153 fish, it's another message of Jesus to the disciples in ancient Hebrew. And remember, everybody there is Jewish. Jesus is Jewish. The disciples are Jewish. So he is saying 153, I am God. So very interesting things are happening um, in the text itself. Sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they're blunt, but I thought it was worth the few minutes to talk a little bit about Hebrew and numerology. It's not numerology, but it's we call it geometry, not geometry, but geometry. Okay, so now that we understand why we have 14 stations of the cross to connect us with David, where do we find 14 stations? You can read and reread the New Testament, and I promise you, you will not find 14 stations. There are a few verses in the Synoptic Gospels, and there is a little bit more information when we talk about John. But as far as the Catholics were concerned, we have to get to 14. That was the connection to David. So if we can't find them, what do? We add them. And we add a few stations. Sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it's just not from the four known books. Aside from the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there were also at that time, or just a little bit after, the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary. These were known to the church, but when they decided about what books are going to be in the Gospels and what books are not going to be in the Gospels, they decided these are in and these are out. Now, it's not to say that we're not using those other books. And today you can go online and you can find quite a bit about these books. So there are a few traditions that are taken from these outsourced books, but they still couldn't get to 14 stations. So they added 3 stations where it just made sense that Jesus would fall down. Jesus is carrying a heavy cross. He is up all night. He hasn't slept. He's been beaten. He is incredibly tired. And now they're asking him to carry the cross. Now, one thing I want to say about carrying a cross, it is not the actual 2 pieces of wood. It's actually the cross beam that you would probably carry on your shoulders like this. I hope you can see what I'm trying to do here. Because usually the other piece of the cross is already in place where you're going to be crucified. Odds are that they would probably just use trees if it was possible. But if you're going to carry the cross, you're carrying the cross beam to the place of the execution itself. So he's carrying this heavy cross, he's walking, and therefore every time there's a turn in the road, the Catholic tradition says that Jesus is going to fall down. And they added these 3 places where he falls down, and that's how they got to 14 stations. Okay, so I'm going to now share with you the video that I took from the old city, and we're going to talk a little bit. There's not much noise in the background, again, equaling what Jesus probably would have, what he would have heard in the middle of the night, even though I'm doing this in the middle of the day. So let me just share. All right, this first picture here, before we press play, I'm standing now on the Mount of Olives. I'm standing now on Mount Zion, as we call it today, looking towards the Mount of Olives. And let me just put this here for you. This area is the Mount of Olives. This tower that I just drew above is the Church of Ascension. This is the traditional site where Jesus ascends to the heavens. Down here below, we can't exactly see it. It's behind these trees, but this is basically the area of Gethsemane, of Gachmanim, the olive press, where Jesus is going to go after the Passover meal. And right here in this area, I'm going to make a little arrow here. This would be, it's not in the picture, but this is where the church depicting Jesus's sentence with the Jewish people, where Peter is going to deny him 3 times, takes place. All of this is Mount of Olives. Let's put an O here. And this is where we are right now, Mount Zion. So, clear the drawings. Listen a little bit to the noise that we have here. I might pause in the middle once in a while just to make a quick notation. And hopefully you can see everything, even the taxis that are driving. A little closer look at the Mount of Olives. And now we're going to make our way to where the Antonial Fortress used to be. Can someone write in the chat if you can hear me over the noise of the video? So what I just did, I zoomed over at this Roman numeral 1. And from this point on, the Via Dolorosa is going to be marked by these signs. Almost every place is going to have a sign like this. The idea is to show where the events traditionally took place. Station number 1 is dedicated to the sentencing of Jesus. Now, in normal days, there are little chapels for each of these stations. Unfortunately, they are closed due to the coronavirus. Not everything was open. Not everything is open in the old city even today. But we do what we can. And let's continue. And as we continue walking, you're going to be able to see some of the shop owners that are optimistic actually open. The guy leaning against the wall over here is a good friend of mine. He's an Armenian Christian. His name is Herod, of all names. And you can see he's standing right under station number 2. And this is the flagellation where Jesus is whipped and handed the cross. Now from here, Jesus is going to make his way, according to the Catholics, towards the city exit, towards one of the gates where he has to exit the city, as we said. Now, these are modern day streets of Jerusalem. They are at least 20 feet, 30 feet, almost 10 meters above the original floor. So at no point are we actually walking on the ancient road. A quick stop of the Via Dolorosa, because this corner is incredible. When we walk down that street that we just walked and we take a look right in front of us, we actually see this minaret, call for prayer tower, meaning that this is a mosque of the Muslims. And then if you look to the right, as the video will show you, when we look to the right, you're going to see an Israeli flag and a Chanukiah, the traditional 9-candle lamp that we have for Hanukkah. This is the Israeli flag folded up a little bit. That's okay. This is actually on top of a roof of a synagogue, which is less than 50 yards from that mosque. And then in the corner itself, look at this. This is the 3rd station of the cross where Jesus is going to fall down the first time. It even says Via Dolorosa right there and there on the street itself. The street that is actually called the Via Dolorosa. Now, Fridays are incredibly unique on this corner that we are standing on right now, because this corner is a crossing point of the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims every single Friday. And if it happens like this year, that Easter and Passover align together almost exactly on the same week, a few days early or later, then during Easter we have tens of thousands of Christians making their way from station 1 and 2 that we just walked down towards this station number 3 junction around 3 p.m. Before that, 2-3 hours ahead of that, it is the Muslim main prayer on Friday. Every Friday is the main prayer. Depending on the time of year, if it's Ramadan, like it's going to be in about a week and a half, we have hundreds of thousands of Muslims making their way through this corner, making their way towards the Temple Mount, because that's the third holiest site for Islam. And they're going to have the main prayer of Friday, of the week, on Friday, on top of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And then every Friday is the beginning of Shabbat for the Jewish people. And there is a very religious neighborhood just outside the Damascus Gate. So when we come from the area of this synagogue that we just saw, let me see if we can show it again. When we're coming in from this area, there we go. That's actually a pretty good picture. This is the street that we would be walking down, and then we cross that same corner that we're standing on our way to the Western Wall for the coming of Shabbat. And during a Passover on a Shabbat, again, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Jews are going to walk through that corner. And it is incredible to see the Muslims and then the Christians and then the Jews every single Friday making their way through that one same corner. Everybody's very respectful of one another, by the way. All right, so let's continue. You can hear Arabic in the background. Most of the shop owners and the people living in the old city are of Arab descent. Doesn't mean that they're Muslim. They could be Christians or Jews. We also have Jewish Arabs. I stopped the video once again because of these tiles. Look at these tiles. You see how over here we have one set of tiles? And over here, very different. They're all limestone, by the way. The only difference is that this one is from about 2,000 years ago, from the time of Jesus. Now, I told you that at no point are we walking on the height level of the streets of Jerusalem, but what they did was they dug down underneath the modern day streets and brought a few of the stones from 2,000 years ago to show you what the pavement looked like. So again, this is today. No, sorry. This is 2,000 years ago. And this is modern. M for modern. We don't have a lot of these 2,000-year-old tiles of the floor to see, but this specific area does have them. And we are continuing our walk from the third station. Still a few of these ancient stones. And already immediately to the left, you'll see the depiction of the third station and the fourth station. You'll see that the doors are closed. Third station on the cross, Jesus is going to fall down for the first time. And right next to it, another tradition is that Jesus's mom, Mary, sees him and meets him. And he comforts her, telling her that this is the destiny. This is station number 4. Jesus meets his mother. Jesus knows that all of his prophecies have to come true. And when he said that one of the disciples will betray him, and he told Peter that he is going to deny him 3 times, then obviously these things have to happen. Otherwise, he's not a true prophet. So he is doing what needs to be done in order for the prophecies to come true. And you can see again the sign of the Via Dolorosa over here. The street name Via Dolorosa. This is number 5, station 5. Talks about Simon of Cyrene. This is actually from the text in the New Testament. Simon of Cyrene is one of the visitors, one of the pilgrims, a Jewish pilgrim that came from Cyrene. There were a couple of places in that name, so we're not sure if it's Northern Africa or maybe part of Turkey somewhere. Either way, this man, according to the text, takes the cross from Jesus, seeing how difficult it is for Jesus, and he walks a part of the way. Now, you got to understand that Jesus was just condemned for basically disturbing the Roman peace, punishable by death. If you help them, you might be seen as a conspirator, and you might be taken and sentenced yourself. So when Simon takes the cross from Jesus, he's actually risking his life. And for this risk, Simon is station number 5. We're going to make a right turn here. Jesus does not fall even though we have a turn here because Simon is taking the cross from him. And again, you can see that the doors are locked. We cannot walk in. And look at all of these shops. Just like at the time of Jesus's sentencing and walk itself, the shops would have been closed in the middle of the night. We would not have seen too many people around. And we are already at station number 6. Apparently, this is the tradition taken from one of the books outside of the Bible, and it talks about a woman named Veronica who takes a napkin and wipes Jesus's face from the sweat and the blood. And when she looks at that napkin, to her amazement, she sees Jesus's image on the napkin itself. Now, the name Veronica is a play with Latin words, verum icon. And verum icon means the real icon, the real image of Jesus. In modern day Jerusalem, we have to walk up from this point. So let's walk up these steps a bit faster. The wonders of technology. And we are making our way towards station 7, where there's another turn in the road. So this is another traditional place where Jesus is going to fall down. This is station number 7. Jesus falls down the second time. Now we're going to take a right and continue our ascent towards station number 8. Over here on the right is one of the most famous hummus places in all of the old city. Probably one of the top 3 hummus places I can talk about. And we are reaching station number 8. Station number 8, Jesus is going to talk to the women of Jerusalem. Now, in ancient times, this area that we are looking at should have had that gate. Remember, we had the temple built over here with the Antonial fortress sticking out. And we had a wall from the Antonial fortress that went something like this around the Upper West Side, around the city of David, and back towards the temple. Actually, it would have been more like this, the wall. I mentioned that there would have been another gate somewhere around here, and this is the gate that Jesus is supposed to exit. Now, the walls of the city of Jerusalem today, of the old city of Jerusalem today, have absolutely nothing to do with the walls as they were back in the day. And therefore, even if there was a gate over here, it's not there today. The walls today of the old city actually go like this, and around. So if we look at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre somewhere around here, it looks like it's inside the city walls. And this was a serious problem in the 19th century, because if the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is inside the city walls, how could Jesus have been buried there? Jewish law states that you cannot bury a Jewish person inside the walled city. It has to be outside the walled city. And once we understood that the walls are different 2,000 years ago, and they were probably around here somewhere, then it was okay to understand why the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built where it is built today. Now, we found out that the stone in this area was not good for building, and therefore this was an active gravesite 2,000 years ago. And when Helen, the mother of Constantine, the emperor of the Romans, in the 4th century, Helen comes to Israel and takes a tour guide, and he shows her all of the places that have to do with Jesus. This tour guide probably took her to this spot over here and told her this is where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. And that's why she builds the church over here. Now, whether we look at the historical version of the Via Dolorosa that we talked about at the beginning, or we look at the traditional Catholic version, even the Greek Orthodox accept that this area, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is the place where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. In fact, this church is one of only two churches in all of Israel where the different denominations of Christianity share the building. Each one has its own traditional ways and different days and different hours of the day that they are allowed to do whatever it is they need to do next to the grave, inside the grave, where the crucifixion took place, and so on. But it is very interesting to note that everybody agrees, almost everybody, never say everybody, but almost everybody agrees that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the traditional site where the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus take place. Okay, we're going to go back to the video. In station 8, as I said, there's supposed to be a gate over here where Jesus is going to turn around and speak to the women of Jerusalem. And just like he comforts his mom, he is going to comfort the women of Jerusalem. And that is station number 8. Now, of course, since there's no gate, we're going to have to backtrack a little bit, walk back towards station 7, where we're going to make a right turn and kind of walk around where the entrance of the church originally used to be. I'm not going to discuss the history of the church itself and the building of the church. You probably just heard somebody making coffee, grounding the beans of the coffee. The smell, the sounds, the colors of the bazaar are just unbelievable. And again, there was a bazaar. This was the market time or the marketplace back in those days. And here, before station 9, we have the first glimpse of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with its with the two chapels that it has, the two domes that it has. You can see it right over here. You can see the big cross. This is the smaller of the domes, and this dome is right above the place where Jesus was crucified. And I don't know if you can see it in the background from my picture, but over here is half of the bigger dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And this dome is right above the spot where the grave of Jesus used to be. We'll explain why used to be and not is in a few minutes. So we're making our way, 1700 years ago when the church was built, we'd be on the rooftop right now of the church. And over here we have station number 9. This is the third time that Jesus is going to fall down. And again, everything was closed. I wasn't able to walk as usually I do through the Ethiopian chapel. So I had to make my way back and walk around to the main entrance of the church. Yes, a bit nicer look at the top of the church. And now we're going to make our way towards the main entrance. You can still see these shops completely empty. It was very sad to walk the streets of Jerusalem like this, where usually there would be thousands of people, both the locals and of course the tourists. Look at this empty square. There are less than 10 people in the square. Okay, and I'm zooming now on a small chapel dedicated to station number 10. Okay, station 9, Jesus falls the third time. And right over here, we have station number 10. Unfortunately, the chapel itself is always closed. We can't really walk into it. But through the window, you can see the mosaics both on the wall and on the floor. And the station is dedicated to the stripping of Jesus's clothing and handing them out to the Roman soldiers. And the last of the stations, station 11, 12, 13, and 14, are inside the church. First of all, we're going to make a right as we walk into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and walk up the steps to a place we call Golgotha Hill. This is another one of those traditions that Jesus was crucified on the hill, even though the text doesn't really use the word hill. And wherever you look inside the church, everything has mosaics and depictions and the beauty is just astounding. You can sense that you're walking into a very special place. Now, in front of us over here, we see Station 11. This little chapel over here, Station 11, and you can see quite clearly Jesus is being crucified, nailed to the cross. It was incredibly silent when I walked up. This is almost a life-size portrayal of Jesus on the cross right over here. And it is above the traditional site that the crucifixion actually took place. And right underneath this life-size portrayal, we can even see the original part of the hill through the glass that they did here. Look at that. This is the 2,000-year-old hill where traditionally Jesus would have been crucified. There we go. And there's a little area here where people can bend down under the table of altar, put their hand through a hole, and actually touch the traditional spot where the crucifixion takes place, where Jesus dies on the cross. Now we're going to have to walk down from the hill. After the death, Jesus is going to be prepared for burial. And we're going to be looking at a beautiful mosaic just as we make our way down the steps here. Look at this mosaic. They're bringing Jesus down from the cross, putting his body on this piece of stone according to the mosaic. And then you can see over here, they're taking Jesus's wrapped body and placing it inside the grave. 2,000 years ago, Jewish burial was inside a cave in the mountain. The cave was big enough for a few people to be buried in. Usually when you walked in, there was a center room big enough for a body to be placed, or even if the family was rich, they would have placed a maybe even a sarcophagus inside, so the body lays in the sarcophagus. And then after a while, after the decaying, all that remains is the bones, and they would have these little holes inside the caves where you can put the bones either in a bone box for eternal rest until the resurrection comes for everybody, or just the bones as they were. And this is a family tomb. So my father and maybe my grandfather are already buried inside of it. Now the Jewish Testament has a saying, he was buried, or he was gathered to his forefathers. You need to take that literally, because they gather the bones and then they place them in the cave with the forefathers. So gathered to his forefathers is a literal expression. And once we saw the mosaic, now take a look. When we walked into the church, I told you that we'll get back to it. We have that stone slab. Look at the depiction on the mosaic. Jesus is lying there. They're cleaning the body, wrapping it. And then this is the stone slab, station 13, as far as the Catholics are concerned, where they're going to clean the body and prepare it for burial. Now, I'm going to diverge a little bit from the Catholic version. And over here, this little chapel that I'm highlighting, this is an Orthodox tradition that says that this is where Mary, Jesus's mother, stood when she was watching Jesus being crucified. The crucifixion would have been somewhere over here on the hill. And then once we cleared the body and prepared it, we continue just a few feet, few meters. Everything is very close by. Today, the church covers all of it. And we walk towards where there was just mountains. Okay, before the church, this was a mountainous area filled with those little caves that were all graves, family tombs. What happened? Why don't we see a cave in a mountain? From the 4th century, pilgrimage of Christians to the Holy Land picked up immensely. There was a stop for a few hundred years during the Arab rule, but when the Christians came, they wanted a small piece to take with them back to their communities. And what better than a piece of the actual grave that Jesus lay in, was buried, and was resurrected from. And slowly, as the Christian pilgrims came from all over the world, they chipped at the grave until nothing was left. And in order to show what was there, or where it was, I should say, this is what was built. This building that you see right under the middle of the dome. Look at the beautiful dome. There was always a dome there. No matter which version of the church we had, there was always a dome above the grave from the beginning in here. Okay, this is the entrance to the grave. I was not allowed into the grave itself this time. Nobody actually was allowed during these times. I did get close and try to zoom in to show you a little bit of what you can see inside. There are actually a couple of rooms. You walk into this room where you can see this basin over here. And then there's a smaller room. You can see it a little bit lit over here. This room, this is the traditional site where Jesus's body would have lay until the resurrection took place. Inside are depictions, candles. There's a stone slab where the traditional site of Jesus's body, where the traditional site that Jesus's body lay. And now notice I'm going to rewind this just a little bit, because what I did now was I'm taking you around where the traditional grave is. Okay, I'm taking you to the right of the grave. And we're going to go to a different location inside the church where we can still see an original 2,000-year-old empty grave. Look at this. Unfortunately, this chapel underwent a huge fire, so there are black marks everywhere. But look at the entrance to this grave. This is exactly what Jesus's grave would have looked like had it not been destroyed over the last 1,700 years or so. A small entrance. And when you walk in, there is the center area where the body is lying until it's decomposed. They didn't have grates. That's so people don't fall or injure themselves. And then hopefully it's clear enough. You can see these small kuchim. This is what we call them in Hebrew. These small, not exactly holes, they're man-made holes. And this is where eventually we put the bones. This is an almost exact version of the grave that you would have seen 2,000 years ago, where today we have that commemorative building under the dome. Thank you for joining me for another webinar. I hope to see you next time in about 2 weeks. Happy Easter, everybody.